record, by the way. I don't actually have a recording of talking to anybody about building voices for children.
Oh, okay.
So I thought this will be a fun one to record. Before we jump in that, you want to look at chapters?
Sure. That I just got a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
What do you think about Charlie sneaking up?
I mean, we're walking this balance between Charlie being an imaginary friend and Charlie having agency.
Yeah.
So it was weird to me that he would sneak. That's what caught me by surprise. I was like, "But wait."
Sometimes you can have a realization in your subconscious to sort of say, "Whoa, that's that light bulb moment," right? It's sneaking up on you.
Okay, that's totally fair. It's your call. It just struck me as funny that she'd be surprised by her own inner monologue. I was like, "Oh,
well,
okay. Yeah, look at that." But yeah, I think it'll be good either way. I really wanted to, and just to talk a little bit more about Charlie, I really wanted to bring him into the front.
Okay.
Chapter. It also felt weird to me that he was asleep. I don't know why that felt weird to me.
I know.
Yeah.
I had to have him there, but I didn't want him to go along. So
yeah.
We'll play around with it.
Yeah.
And what did you think about the Lucy rescue?
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I blew out the scene with Lash and the rope a little bit.
Okay.
Because I don't know that Lucy, like I was reading it and I was like, would Lucy give the dog a rope? Like
she would if she'd ever seen Lassie.
Yeah, but it's 1920. Has she seen Lassie?
No, not yet.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, I just blew that up a little bit and had a little back and forth, her saying like, to the wolf, like give the wolf the rope. Just to kind of play with it a little bit. I thought it was a really fun scene. I thought the Lucy rescue was great. Is that going somewhere? Is she going to go back and tell Sam?
In terms of the plot structure, this is the last chance for Dolores to sort of deny the truth.
Okay.
She can continue on and confront Johnny, or she can help her friend, and so she decides she's going to help her friend.
Nice.
And so that was the purpose for that. It means then that she gets to the claim site with Johnny later than she had thought. But that, at the end of the day, gives Sam a chance to get there.
Gotcha.
Sort of coming right behind her, sort of almost. So
okay. That's great. And I really liked what you did between Dolores and the wolf. I thought that was really great. I love the last line, that "don't look at me like that."
Yeah.
That was really great.
You've got a dog. You've said that to your dog.
I have. Yeah. I was actually really mad at my dog this morning. I said all kinds of things to my dog. He woke us up at 3:30 in the morning this morning, and he went from bedroom to bedroom jumping on each individual person to wake up the entire house for
there you go.
No other reason than he just wanted to play. So he was like, somebody will come and play with me. I was adding in here, Dolores. On page 12, I wanted to stick a little bit of dialogue in there. She's like walking in the rain. I just added, and I did it, I think, a couple times. I just added her like encouraging the mule forward.
Yeah.
As kind of like a way to give her some voice a little bit in that scene, just to keep it moving a little bit more.
Yeah. I've been careful at counting my paragraphs so that I never exceed 5.
Yes. I've totally got it in your head. That makes me so happy. That's amazing. Yeah, and you didn't, but I just felt like, this, I think, talking to the mule, because you've got like on page 11, you have this really great you know, they're walking, and she says, "What do you think? Will Johnny even be there? Will we get to the claim site, or will the bad weather have chased him back to town?" So she's like talking to the wolf, and then you've got a paragraph of prose and a paragraph of prose and a paragraph of prose. So you only have 3. But I was like, you know, but you had this her kind of talking to herself, like slow and steady. So just go ahead and like give it to the donkey, like let her talk to the donkey, you know, or like down here you had another piece about her kind of talking to herself. So I just again like gave it to her talking to the donkey, because that feels like a very natural thing for people to do. Like I know when whenever I ride a horse, I have a deep desire to talk to them. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's because their ears are right there.
Yeah, that's maybe part of it. It's like it's also because I'm petrified that they're going to take off. But like I know that people that ride a lot tend to talk to the horse or the mule they're riding on. People that work with mules a lot tend to talk to them a lot. But yeah, anyway, so it just felt like a good. But overall, I thought your chapters were great.
Good.
I didn't have any like big like dialogue structural things. I'm really pumped about reading
the ending
finale. Yeah. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, it is actually. I've rewritten it a couple of times as we've worked through all the various dialogue because obviously the climax is really intense.
Yeah.
And so I'm fingers crossed that it's close anyway.
Yeah, I think it's super close. I think it feels really good. Yeah, I feel like the whole thing is really great. I'm really curious to see what you do with some of these characters in the second book.
Oh yeah. Actually, I'm really excited. I can hardly wait for NaNoWriMo to start so I can start writing.
Nice. You're just gonna crush it out.
Yeah. Exactly. So, stutters and children.
Yeah, next characters. So let's just take them one at a time. Let's take Nipper first.
Okay.
And just for the sake of consistency, let me talk to you about what I did with what you sent me.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my screen a little bit. Which screen am I sharing? That's always the question. I'm sharing this screen. Yeah. So I'm on my work setup, so I have three screens up. So I was like, which one has my email on it? Okay, so I don't share that one. So you sent me this amazing research. I'm envious.
Right, and I found a board member from the Canadian Stutterers Association who's going to do a sensitivity reading once the book is written.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that so much. Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, I'm really happy you did that. So what I did was we'll just focus on Nipper. This is a chart I use
okay.
as a voice reminder. So when I'm building characters, this is the chart that I use to like build voices to make sure they contrast. What I like about it is it lets me line all of my characters up. So like the chart I'm doing right now for the book that I'm rewriting, I have 20 characters. So I just line them all up, right? Like, and this will serve for me as like a general, not necessarily a cheat sheet, but almost like a storing of information thing, especially across books. Like as I'm carrying characters across books. So it wouldn't be bad to like come and fill in your current characters. Like I shared this with you, by the way. You have access to this. Good. This is your sheet now. So you can do with it whatever you want. But I was just going to use it as a tool for our conversation today. So you can find it in your Gmail.
Okay.
But all that to say, I go ahead and put all of my characters in here. So I'd have like a line for Dolores, a line for Sam, a line for Lucy, a line for Johnny, like any of the characters. Right. And I do this for any characters that I plan that are either going to be like a major character in a book or are going to repeat across a series. Right. To remember them. So just real quick, like what the columns are, I do character name because I'm constantly misspelling characters' names. Then I do like general details, and I just put things in here. So what I did, I read through the document you sent me, and I've just gone through and grabbed like details that are going to affect the personality of the character, and I just put them in here. Okay. And then I do general personality notes. And I try to keep this as simple as possible because, again, I just want to be able to look at it and like recall what the character is, or who the character is. And then I'll have notes on voice. And this is my column for like he stutters, or he talks with an accent, or he whispers a lot to himself, or, you know, he talks to himself occasionally. Like, this is where I'll put notes on voice. So we'll do this second part together because this is where the voice really starts to come out.
Okay.
Where we put some adjectives to how they sound in each state of anxiety.
Okay.
So like we do with Dolores and Lucy right now, where like as Dolores gets stressed, she has less words. She becomes more forceful and aggressive, right? Like she starts
Right.
driving that. As she begins to relax, she lets down her guard a little bit. She becomes a little bit more vulnerable when she's feeling comfortable with Lucy. She might actually open up and accept help from somebody else. So like you can kind of like you can see how this starts to build on both ends and how the voice changes a little bit. You know, for Lucy, for example, in the baseline voice, we have Lucy being very formal and using like, you know, Miss Bailey and Sheriff Brown. But then as she starts to relax, she lets go of that and starts using first names a little bit more. And then when she starts feeling comfortable, she quotes a lot less Shakespeare and she talks a lot more about, you know, do you want to drink, right? Like, so she starts where we can see in Lucy, like as she becomes more comfortable, that guard coming down. We haven't really done Lucy in high anxiety. So it'd be interesting to see what she does as she becomes more anxious. But all that to say, so we'll do this second with Nipper and Evie, because we want to get like the straight thing down first. So are you okay with doing this to kind of flesh out the voice?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So let's talk through Nipper's character details. You have that he's 16 years old, that he works with Bonanza at Smitty, and that he's done so. Sorry, let me expand this a little bit so I can type. So that he's done so since he was 12.
Right.
You've got that he's
and in the Bonanza, he has far less of a stutter because Smitty always looks after him, and it's a safe place for him.
Okay.
So, which is why he's a bit agoraphobic. He won't go outside the Bonanza unless he's, you know, out hiking in the woods by himself.
Okay.
Because he doesn't want to talk to anybody.
So I would encourage you not to use the word agoraphobic for that.
Oh, yeah.
Agoraphobia has kind of a different connotation at times, and I don't want you to get like, I know how like we can label something with a word and then like all of a sudden we were using that word to, so I do this all the time. I use a word to describe something, and then all of a sudden that word becomes like the word, instead of the word describing the thing, the word starts to define the thing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. I don't want you to, it doesn't sound to me like what you're saying is that Nipper is afraid to go outside, which is what agoraphobia is. There are like people who are agoraphobic are so anxious about what might happen to them in the outside world that they are afraid literally to like leave a room.
Right. Oh, okay.
And so if you have him like walking in the woods and spending time alone outside, he's not agoraphobic.
Okay.
Because he's okay to like leave the safe space. He's just cautious around people. Am I getting that right?
Right. And much more than cautious. I mean, he goes out of his way to avoid people.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're going to put in there that he's got less of a stutter at the Bonanza because it's a safe place where Smitty can protect him, which I like because it's something I put in here from your document is that he has a stutter that increases with anxiety. So like this is a nice, like when he feels safe, the stutter starts to go away, which is good. So let's just go ahead and put that in, that at his baseline voice, he has a mild stutter. As he begins to relax, when he feels safe, the stutter starts to go away.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to make sure it never goes away completely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he always has to have that stutter. I'm just going to I'll leave these columns blank for now, just so you know.
Right.
We're just going to do 3 columns for these characters.
Okay.
For like side characters like these, I usually only do 3 columns. I do baseline, beginning to relax, and increased anxiety. For Dolores, your main character, I'd probably do all
of them. Okay.
But that I just do that for like, hey, I don't need to push these. I don't need to push these characters to like their absolute end where they're gonna completely break.
Right.
You know, like for Dolores, anxiety at its breaking point. This is when she starts to cry, right? Like you've written those beautiful scenes where she starts crying. So like I would do this for Dolores. I'd have a full spectrum, but for Nipper and Evie, I'm only gonna have a couple. Yeah. So when he feels safe, so we can go ahead and put here that the stutter
increases
and becomes frustrating, which is something you said earlier too, that like he gets one of the nice things I like about the character you've written here is that there's going to be a very clear change in his voice based on his emotional state, because that stutter is going to increase to the point of becoming really frustrating for him, which is great. Okay, so he works at the Bonanza, spends his time in the woods, which I heard you say is to avoid people.
He avoids people, but also he's found one of the coping techniques is he can yell practice phrases, because if he shouts, he loses it, and that's how Dolores and Lash hear him, is he's out there shouting ordinary words like I'll clean that table, I'll pick up those glasses, and like he's rehearsing, right? And the louder he shouts, the less stuttering happens, because of course you've got all that breathing happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really love that detail. That's fantastic. Okay, that's great.
Okay.
He likes hanging out with Lash.
Yep.
The wolf.
Yep.
By the way, we didn't talk about in the chapters. I loved that you brought the stranger back at the end. That was fantastic.
Oh, good.
Really good. I was wondering if you were ever going to bring him back, and I love that you brought him back at the end. Avoids eye contact with people. That's great. Like this, like evasive. I don't want to talk to people.
Yeah, I'm going to give him really long bangs that hide his face, so that he's always looking down and they're hanging in front of his face. Yeah.
And shies away from loud and aggressive people, especially.
Right.
Okay. And then in his personality notes, you listed that he's timid, intelligent, curious, disciplined, and loyal. He's been bullied and feels a lot of shame, but not bullied, you're saying, at Bonanza.
Never.
Okay.
No. And I'll probably do a quick little scene where somebody who's new in town tries to do it, maybe by imitating and mimicking him, and Smitty chucks him out the street.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in general, he has a stutter that increases anxiety. His common word, his stuttering. He has I just totally blew through that without actually reading the words on the page. It was happening in my head. He has a stutter that increases with anxiety, stutters at the beginning of a word, especially if it has a hard consonant like B, P, D, T, S. And I added W in there.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of stutterers, and W at the beginning of a word can be really hard.
Yeah. And they have a thing where in addition to the stutter going into the word gets longer. Yes, like it's sort of exaggerated. So
yeah, I heard one guy say that stutterers live in the vowels.
Yeah.
that like as they become more uncomfortable, they start to expand vowels because they can say the vowels. So there's kind of this coping technique where they start to unconsciously blow out their vowels, like you're saying, like expand the word on the vowels. So you get like so if we were to write that, it would be like if we were going to write the word would in his increasing anxiety, right? Like, because you don't want his stutter to get terrible until his increasing anxiety. You might want to be like,
and we would, in terms of writing that out, the hyphens, I'm pointing at the screen here, the hyphens would mean that it's wah, and then with no hyphen it's ood.
Yeah, that's how I would read it.
Okay, good.
I would combine it with no hyphen. And so let's use this phrase in each phase of his anxiety. So like this would be the increasing anxiety, right? Like in his normal anxiety, I don't think you want him always having this prolonged stutter. So you want it like I would.
Yeah.
Right? Like you want to keep it short. And then when it starts to go away, you'll have it like.
And what he would probably do is I period would, like he would, I breathe would.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. The thing about writing something like this is you don't want to do this like prolonged word all the time, because it's going to become a pain in the butt to read. So you don't want to make him like incomprehensible to read. So like keeping it mild most of the time, where he's just like a couple extra letters.
And
I think
also
going to be helpful.
He wouldn't be talking a lot because he knows that he's going to be inarticulate, because he's going to be quite anxious around Evie's dad, because the dad's a jerk, right? It's the one that's abusing Evie. And so, and he's going to, I mean, people have this both an intuitive sense, but also Evie's dad comes into the bonanza a lot and is loud. So he knows he can't do anything to nip her there, but sort of lies in wait to abuse him verbally, at least. Outside of it.
Sorry, I'm just putting in a note that he avoids Evie's dad because he is abusive. So as we're talking about his kind of baseline voice, we want to make him hesitant to talk, like you were saying, and short sentences, 3 to 4 words max. Right? Like, because at 16, he's going to learn at this point that like he's not saying a lot of words. Right? Like, there's not going to be like, do you want some ice cream? Oh my gosh, I love ice cream. It's great.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like keeping his sentences.
Right, because 16-year-old boys probably wouldn't talk a lot anyway, right?
I mean, some of them are going to, but yes, like 16-year-old boys aren't going to talk a lot. He's not going to, right? No storytelling.
Yeah.
No storytelling for him. He's not going to tell long stories. So that brings in something that's interesting about him, because you have him here as curious. So how do you see that curiosity playing out if he's not asking questions?
I would think he's going to be curious. He doesn't go to school, and so he can't read. And when he's out in the woods, he's looking at everything, right? Leaves and trees and bark and flowers and birds and all that kind of stuff. When he's in the bar with Smitty, I mean, he won't stutter a lot with Smitty at all. And so you could see him asking questions then. Why? Why are you doing that? And, how come you're doing that? And all that kind of stuff, right? And Smitty doesn't have a family. And so you could see him sort of taking the time to sort of pass on that knowledge that he's acquired.
Okay. I'm gonna recommend you don't have him asking why, but
Okay.
give him a physical tell that Smitty understands. Raised eyebrow.
Okay.
Or cocked head.
Yeah, or what about if he's got this long hair? What about if he tucks his hair behind his ears so that you can see his face?
I like that when he's feeling safe.
Yeah.
I think that's a good tell for when he's feeling safe. Like a good physical moment for when he's beginning to relax. He can tuck his hair behind his ears.
Yeah.
That'll be a nice indicator to the reader of like Nipper's chilling out a little bit.
Yeah.
But when he's asking questions, especially with Smitty and then in the future with Dolores as he builds a relationship with her, you want him to come off a little like Lash, where he's not using words, right? Like you do that really well, right? Like, so people that he knows are going to read his facial expressions. So he doesn't need to ask Smitty why. He just needs to cock his head and look at him. Yeah. And then Smitty can answer or explain. Or he doesn't need to like say like, how come? He can just like raise his eyebrow and Smitty will understand. So using those like physical tells for him, I think is going to be really helpful in keeping his personality quiet, especially for people that know him. And that can be the difference between insiders and outsiders for him. Right, like insiders are going to understand his physical things.
Yeah. Now, towards the end of this book, he's quite heroic because he's going to be the one that gets Evie physically to safety, and he forms a friendship with Evie. And Evie's only 8, so Evie's going to have some real hero worship. First of all, because he's 16 and older.
Yeah.
So that might be another sort of situation like where he's relaxed, although Evie is also going to be very protective of him, especially when her father's around, again, sort of almost like a big sister, even though she's half his age.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to push you on Evie's voice in a minute.
Okay.
So we've got this, so let's review real quick. We've got Nipper. He's got a mild stutter when he's normal. He's very hesitant to talk, intentionally short sentences, 3 to 4 words max, no storytelling, examines stuff physically to show his curiosity. So you want him like playing with things, looking at things, looking at stuff intently, right? Like, and then we're going to give him some physical tells that substitute for questions with people he knows. Well, and let's make that with people who understand him. There's a nice thing about characters like Nipper where, like, if Dolores picks up on his physical tells right away, there's going to be an immediate bond formed.
Yes.
Right? Like, if Dolores can just be like, if Dolores treats him like Smitty treats him, where when he raises an eyebrow, Dolores starts explaining, there'll be an immediate bond between the two of them.
Yeah. And as part of the research I'm doing, I'm reading a middle grade book about a young boy who's very disfigured and his first day in school and all that kind of stuff. And in the book, he is very aware of how people react to him. And again, he's got a visual disfigurement, and so it's when they look at him and then look away or whatever. But with Nipper, it will be, whether they wait for him to finish talking,
Yeah.
right? Because it takes them a long time sometimes to finish talking.
Yeah.
And with Dolores, she's not going to care. She just
Yeah.
waits, right? And
She doesn't want to talk anyway.
yeah, she doesn't want to talk anyway.
Yeah.
And and so if he wants to spend the whole time he's with her not talking, that's fine with her.
Yeah. I love that. That's really great. So, a good model for his voice. Have you ever seen the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village?
No.
Joaquin Phoenix plays a character in The Village that has a mild stutter. It's more when he gets anxious, but is extremely heroic.
Okay.
And very much what you're describing in Nipper. He's very curious. He's very intelligent. He's very observant. He figures things out before other people do. And he's also very heroic. So like he has these heroic moments where he takes a stand with his words and you can tell how hard it is for him. But it adds to this sense of heroism where he's like sacrificing his own self-consciousness to stand in front of people and make a speech. So
right.
Yeah, I'd watch it just for his character.
Okay.
It's a fun
That sounds
movie.
good. Yeah.
And you'll like it because it's got kind of a historical fiction bent to it.
Well, I am listening to On the Road, which is the creepiest book. Like, I don't like dystopian, apocalyptic kind of stuff. So,
Well, don't listen to too much of it. Once you get the kid's voice down, turn it off.
I may not finish it. I don't really care whether they get the end or not.
Well, and I'll just spoil it for you. It gets worse.
Okay. God. Normally I like to listen to something when I'm falling asleep at night, but this is just way too awful.
Yeah,
right?
but are you getting so one of the reasons I recommended it is because it's got that like simplicity of the child's voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that there's very few barriers.
Yeah.
He just comes out with stuff.
He just says things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whatever. And we'll get to that in a second. I actually have a child development chart I'm going to give you, but we'll like voice development as to how a kid's voice changes over years, but we'll look at that in a second. So just put a pin in that because I want to finish Nipper before we start moving into Evie.
Okay.
So let's talk about when his anxiety increases. How does he speak more or less in your mind?
Much less.
Okay.
And not complete sentences.
Okay.
And there would be a lot of physical anger, like fists clenched and shoulders tight and,
Gotcha.
all that kind of stuff. And I've been watching some videos of people who stutter, and they do a facial thing as they're trying to force the words out. And sometimes they have like a physical gesture. So when it gets really bad, they'll throw an arm out or something, or hit their leg or hit the side of their face or whatever as a physical way of getting past whatever is blocking the words from coming out.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would recommend we want to keep him relatable. I'd recommend he hit his leg. I know like hitting your face or like hitting your chest or something like that is common, is not in the real world as common, but in fantasy world, we want people feeling sorry for him, but we also don't want him to come off as like freakish.
Freaky. Yeah.
And someone punching their face is scary. And so we don't want him to be scary. We want him to be a little tragic. So I'd keep him punching his leg because it's, demonstrates the frustration without crossing that
Mm-hmm.
line.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to his curiosity when his anxiety increases?
It disappears, I would
Okay.
think. I mean, his whole emotional response is flight, right? He wants, whatever is causing this, he wants to get away as fast as he can.
That's nice. It'll give you a nice hero moment when he finally makes the turn and doesn't leave.
Yeah, yeah,
That'll be that'll be a
yeah.
really nice moment.
Well, and I think what I'll do is, like, Dolores, while she's quite easy being around him, and that she's not unaware of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And so she's got this plan, and Nipper's got to get Evie away, and she's going to turn to him and sort of say, like, can you do it?
Yeah.
Right? Because Jared's going to be there, that, like, the father's going to be there, it's going to be tense, like, I need to know you're going to be able to do it. Can I count on you? And
Yeah.
he's going to look at her, yes, you can count on me. And he will do it.
Yeah.
And does do it. Yeah.
Well, he probably needs to be like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he'll be pretty caught up in the moment of that as well. Right.
Yeah. You want to stretch that response out with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. When he starts to relax, I'm going to recommend that you increase his curiosity.
Yeah.
So that it kind of like lets loose.
Yeah.
And maybe here he'll finally verbally ask a question.
Yeah. Well, he's going to be out at the still because he's out in the woods and they find him. And so he's at the still. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there if you're a curious boy, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you've got, the cauldrons and the chemical processes happening and all that kind of stuff. So you can really see him being drawn to the magic of making this moonshine,
Yeah. So I'm adding here that when he's beginning to relax, he's in that safe place.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have him laugh and play.
Okay. Yeah.
And drawn to magic of the world.
Yeah.
Right. So like in essence, he's going to kind of like, you're going to see the kid in him.
Yeah.
Right. Especially a kid that's been around adults so much. So, the kid you're building here, the teenager you're building here is in a world of adults if he's working at the Bonanza. And he's in essence, a lot of times seeing the worst of men.
Yeah.
So there's what I like about how you've built this baseline voice is that he's very guarded and very like protective of himself. So when he starts to relax, let him laugh and let him play and let him like poke at things, like boys do, and combine things that he may not supposed to combine, right? Like
things blow up.
Yeah, he's gonna fiddle with stuff, right? Like he's gonna fiddle with knobs and levers and like whatever else is in the still. He's gonna play
gauges and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, he's gonna touch things he shouldn't touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. He may even make some jokes.
Yeah.
When he's comfortable and alone. Right. Or when he's comfortable, when he's alone with people that he likes. Right. Like you want him to tease and play a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel about Nipper's voice? Do you feel are you comfortable with it? Do you want to Okay.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. In fact, I'm already thinking about scenes where we can really showcase that voice.
Yeah.
Because I want he's my B story character, obviously.
Yeah.
And that, but he at the end of the book he winds up going out with Dolores on deliveries, which is huge.
Yeah.
Right. It
feels to me like he replaces Charlie.
Well, he is there's the dog, there's the kid, there's the imaginary friend.
I mean,
So
yeah, if you're,
somehow Dolores has to get real friends.
yeah, I mean, my recommendation is at the end of the second book, you replace,
Yeah,
because Dolores is already getting more agency in your first
yeah,
book.
yeah.
She's bonded with Lucy. She's got the wolf. She's slowly talking to Sam, right? Like, so building these relationships. By the time you're like 2/3 of the way through book 2, you're actually
Yeah,
not going to have room for Charlie. So
yeah.
I would intentionally have Nipper replace him.
Okay,
You
that
may
sounds good.
even want to have Charlie give Charlie a goodbye scene.
Yeah,
Like, you don't need me anymore. You've got this,
yeah,
like, you can almost picture them like in her house and her like watching him sleep and having a conversation with Charlie and
yeah. I
having
have
Charlie
a
explain like, you don't need me anymore. I don't need to be here.
yes, exactly. And I mean things like if he goes on the deliveries, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no room in the cab of the truck for the
Yeah.
three of them,
Yeah.
and so he could almost say it like that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, there's no, you don't need, like, you don't need me to talk to anymore.
yeah,
Right. Like,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think I'm tearing up a little bit. I think that could be really, really moving, uh, to have her like let go of this thing she's been holding on to.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think if you do it right, it can be very exciting for like her character development.
Hmm.
But yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Yep. Um, okay. Unfortunately for her, you're gonna have to plan some scenes in book 2 where she is alone, so she can have conversations with Charlie. Because you're
Yes,
putting her
actually,
around.
there's a few.
Yeah.
A lot of them around when they're in the truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there's the great scene where she's trying to bake the cake and he's not much help.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, let's talk about Evie. So,
Okay.
ooh, how can I make this so we can see them both at the same time? Move this up. So Evie's 8 years old. She's been physically abused. She expresses reluctance to go home. She has a hero worship of Nipper. She's protective of Nipper, and we're also saying she's Lucy's student.
Yeah, Lucy's student, and she runs away a lot. Because when she winds up hiding with Dolores, the town doesn't really look for her because, here we go again, right?
Yeah. Who's she running to?
Normally, I haven't thought that far ahead. She's always found. Um, uh, so in the book, she meets Dolores. She recognizes that Dolores is a very strong person. Because she's also a very introverted little girl who spends a lot of time reading. So she's got, fantasies and princesses and princes who rescue her and that kind of stuff rolling around in her brain. So she's seeing Dolores as a white knight. So she shows up on Dolores's doorstep.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there's a fantasy that lots of little girls have that this isn't my real life. In my real life, I'm princess of fairyland,
Yeah.
and eventually my real parents will come and take me away. And so there's that going on in her head as well.
Love it. Let's look real quick at stages of development before we get too far into developing her voice, because I think that'll help us kind of get a feel for where things are. I'll email this to you.
Okay.
Most of this comes from the CDC, and it's just a chart I've put together about. So I'm going to blow it up so it's easier to see. It's just a chart I've put together about how kids develop cognitively, socially, emotionally, and with language.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about 3, 4, 5. I have 3 to 11 on here.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of what I consider child age. So when you're reading The Road, they never say how old that kid is. I kind of put that kid at 5.
Oh, that young?
I do. I don't know if
Oh, okay.
that's what they were intending. When I read his voice in my head, he's 5. And part of that is because, so like each of these progress. So the 11-year-old can do all of these things,
Yes.
but the difference between 4 to 5 is 5 starts to get more awareness of what's happening. So like up here cognitively, 5 is starting to draw more complex people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like starting to understand. And that means means like physically draw, but there's also
Yeah.
like drawing more conclusions about people. He starts to understand the order and process of things. And at the same time, what he's not doing, because we get into the higher charts, we can get to what they're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
He's not doing things like necessarily cooperating with others in the road, right? Like he's not mimicking adult behaviors well. So
Yeah.
in the road, right? Like he's kind of feeling jealousy, but not a lot. He doesn't show any modesty about his body necessarily in
Yeah.
that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and he kind of understands speech, but not really in the road, which is why but he asks a lot of simple questions
Right.
in the road. Like he's asking a lot of like basic questions of his dad in that book. So I would put that kid's voice between like 5 and 6, right?
Okay.
Living in there. So we're talking about a kid who's 8 years old. So we want her to be able to understand speech and speak well, right? Like we want her to actually be able to process language. Um, she doesn't have the simple voice of the character of The Road. She's
Right.
on that, where she's actually like
Okay.
putting sentences together. At the same time, she's not going to be able to stand up and give a speech to people
No.
because she can't organize thoughts on that level. Right. So when she's storytelling, the stories need to feel like unplanned. Right. So they're just kind of rambling out. Like she doesn't necessarily know the point she's getting at.
Is there a point?
Not necessarily for an 8-year-old, no.
Right. You're my grandson's, 5.5, and he has lots of stories, but they don't tend to go anywhere. Right. You
Yeah.
know.
Now hers are going to go somewhere because she's in that 6 to 8 range. Like
Right.
her stories are going to feel like they've got progression and they're moving, but there's not a like underlying metaphor she has. Does that make sense? Like, so
Right.
yeah. So like an 11-year-old might tell a story about how like she's a fairy princess and she needs a knight in shining armor. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that would be her way of like conveying to Nipper that he's coming to protect her, like hinting, like having an underlying meaning behind her story. An 8-year-old is not going to have that underlying meaning. It just feels good to talk about her being a fairy princess.
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
so.
And her dress, and maybe she's got purple wings, and
Yeah.
and yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's not rambling like a 5-year-old, right? Like a 5-year-old
Right.
is like, I'm a princess and I have purple wings and you have purple wings too. And we all live together on a
Yeah. Yeah.
sky and
Yeah.
there's a dragon. And you're like, okay, is there an end to this
Yeah.
thing? An
Yeah.
8-year-old is going to have more structure, right? Like,
Right.
I'm a
And
fairy princess.
she reads a lot, so she'll have
Okay.
that structure of a fairy tale.
Yeah.
She's not reading Little Women, Louisa May Alcott kind of stuff.
No, she's reading Once Upon a Time.
She's reading Once Upon a Time. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think that's good. So we're pushing her into like, if she's reading a lot, she's probably pushing into like a little bit higher stage of development, which means she can start drawing some logical inferences based on her reading.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like, an 8-year-old reads A Cat in the Hat, and thinks it's hysterical that they destroyed the house and then fixed it.
Right.
A 9-year-old starts to worry that the kids are going to get in trouble when mom comes home, and relates it to like a story about themselves.
Okay.
They're like,
Yes.
this is like that time that this happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, so being able to draw that inference to what the 9-year-old, like being able to draw parallels to their own life is makes her a little bit advanced. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if
Yep.
she's making that line between like Cinderella was an orphan,
Mm-hmm.
living with a wicked stepmother, and maybe I'm living
Mm-hmm.
with a wicked stepmother too, that's an advanced skill for her. She needs to just push it a little bit, not a ton.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so uh, when we come to like social and emotional, that idea of her having like a best friend, of like Nipper being her best friend, like one single person she attaches to, that's going to also be a little more advanced for her. So we want her to have multiple best friends. We want her latching on to multiple people. Does that make
Uh,
sense?
yes. And would like the the little girls I'm thinking of, in grade school, wrap themselves around their teachers, right?
Yes.
A teacher's pet is a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And it's nice that that's definitely true of like mentors, like, wrapping themselves around adult figures because they want approval.
Hmm.
They
And she
want to be
will.
approved of. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing what's nice about having her at 8 is that she can feel jealousy. Whereas
Yes.
like if she were like 5 or 6, jealousy's going to but she's not going to feel peer pressure.
No. No.
Right. So she still has that like innocence of a kid where she
Yeah.
doesn't feel peer pressure, but she does feel jealousy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Having that in our head, let's kind of look at the voice chart, and talk about her a little bit.
Okay.
As you're talking to me about her, I'm feeling 2 different voices.
Hmm.
There's the shy, timid, avoids people, withdrawn, antisocial that you put in your research. Then there's the telling stories, latching on to individuals, wanting to, when she hides, she's running to people's houses,
Hmm.
side. So those are 2 very different characters. Uh,
Okay.
and I would recommend, you already have a lot of shy antisocial characters. You've
Okay.
got Dolores, who's shy and like guarded and protected and like doesn't want to open up. Now you're putting in Nipper, who's
Yeah.
also going to be shy. So
Yeah.
if you're okay with talking about it this way, I would go the other direction with her. So she's an abuse victim. We still need that like results of abuse, but not all abuse victims are shy. A lot of
Right.
times abuse can result in accommodating, being like apologetic, not wanting to mess up at all, like
Yes.
especially when they take the abuse on themselves and they're like, this was my fault
Right.
that this happened. So I would say let's get rid of words like timid. Right? Like
Okay.
she doesn't need to be timid. She doesn't need to be depressed. We've got enough like
Yeah.
guarded
Yeah.
people already. She doesn't need to be withdrawn or have unusual shyness. These are all words I took from your design
Yeah. Okay.
document. She doesn't need to fear caretakers, right? Like oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. She instead we want her like seeking approval,
Okay.
right? Like she wants to be Lucy's favorite student,
Right. Absolutely.
right? We also want her trying to control her environment. No mistakes, right? Like we
Uh-huh.
want, because that's her response to abuse. is that like if I just don't screw up, maybe daddy won't hit me again.
Right. And she's got a little sister, Gracie, and I'm thinking like Gracie's not much younger, but she'll be that 5-year-old, right?
Great.
And so she's always running interference for Gracie because she's trying to keep Gracie from being a bad girl, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which I love because it gives her this very courageous, protective of the weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like you can almost see her standing in for Nipper if he needs her. Right? Like she's not going to she's going to take the punch.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible metaphor for this circumstance.
Yes.
For this situation. Metaphorically, you know what I mean. If there's a hit coming, like not a physical hit, but like if something bad is going to happen, she's going to step in the way.
Yeah. Do you
so that other people don't have to take it.
Right. She would also blame herself as well. If I was a good girl, if I was, better behaved, if I hadn't have spilled the porridge, kind of thing. Yeah.
Blames herself.
Yeah.
So we want her apologetic.
Yeah.
Right. We want her quick to take the blame for things going wrong that aren't her fault. Right? Like if she accidentally knocks over a glass at Lucy's house, she's going to apologize profusely. We want her accommodating to other people. And aware, hyper aware of anger.
Yes.
Right? When other people are getting angry, she gets anxious.
Yeah.
Right? She likes everything, and this goes into her controlling nature, trying to take control of the world, no mistakes. She wants it calm.
Yeah.
Right? No yelling.
Yeah.
You can almost see her telling Nipper that, right? Like, no yelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
She wants it slow. And then so this idea of a girl who like loves to read and is seeking approval from others, trying to run interference with Gracie. Now you can bring in this idea that she's got fantasy and princesses on the brain and she likes to talk about it a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like, so, escapes by telling stories. So now we're starting to fill her out a little bit as like she's actually going to be a little talkative. If we come up to the top and put in here those words like we had for Nipper, she's going to be a little bit talkative. She's going to pursue positive adult attention. Right? Like she likes making adults happy.
Yeah. Yeah. She's the one that wants to stay after school and clean the blackboards. And,
yeah. So she seeks opportunities to please authority figures. Right? Like, so what's nice about this is that if we look up at Nipper, now we've got two very contrasting B characters.
Right.
Right? Like they don't feel the same anymore. They feel very different. And the cast of characters is starting to expand a little bit, which is what we're looking for, like having like this very diverse cast, as opposed to two characters that are, antisocial and like moving away from people. Right? Like here. So I would have her, if she's running away a lot, she's running to Lucy.
Yes. Yes, that's a great idea.
She's looking for more schooling.
Well, and also Lucy is the authority figure, right? I mean, in her mind, Lucy and her pa are going to be pretty powerful individuals.
Yeah.
Maybe the most powerful. Maybe we'll put a preacher, pastor, somebody like that in there too.
Yeah, so she's running to an authority figure that approves of her. It's very to draw a comparison for you, it feels very much like Matilda from the Roald Dahl book.
Yeah, yeah.
She loves
Yes.
her teacher, right? Like she
Yeah.
loves because the teacher is kind to her and like
Yeah.
approves of her intelligence, and
Yeah.
she doesn't want anything to do with her family because the
Right.
family, the parents are so mean to her. Now Matilda's a second kid, so she doesn't need to protect her older brother.
Right.
She's running, so yeah, and that's a question of like running away and leaving her sister at home with her dad is kind of asynchronous from the personality we're building.
Right.
I might take the sister away if you can.
And
I
just
might
have her an only child?
make her an only child.
Okay.
Now she doesn't have to worry. Now she can run away and she doesn't have to worry about what's happening back at home.
Right.
Right. Plus it decomplicates the plot.
Okay.
Yeah, because now you don't have to write another kid's voice for her little sister.
Right.
You can just focus on one kid's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you know, how does that feel?
Good.
Good. How are you feeling about this so far?
Is she too old to suck her thumb if she gets in a really bad spot?
No. I was going to say yes, but one of my kids sucked his thumb until he was 10.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Uh,
Maybe when she's all by herself.
yeah. Yeah, and it is a like, you know, it is kind of a regression of like this feels. People suck their thumbs because it feels soothing, so it's like always
Yeah.
it's a comfort mechanism. Feels relaxing. So yeah, when she's alone, or unconscious of other people around her.
Okay.
So like when she's really lost in a book.
Right. Okay.
She might suck her thumb. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
Especially if she's in her bedroom and dad's being really awful with mom.
yeah.
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 She'll be reading to escape and that thumb is going to
Yeah.
wound up in there. Yeah. Okay.
Terrible with mom. You can see her like almost like sucking her thumb under her covers
Mm-hmm.
while trying to read.
Yeah.
Right, like that escapist escapes into fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I feel really good about this voice, but it's not my character, right? So, how do you feel about this personality for her?
Yeah. It's good. I'm going to make her a little bit bossy.
I think that's great
Yeah. And
because she's controlling.
especially around Nipper.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe and he'll be amused by it.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't have a lot of contact with kids or
Yeah.
little girls.
Yeah.
But so he's almost like a little miniature Sam
Yeah.
sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see her bossy. She's quick to apologize. You want to give her a
Yeah.
lot of I'm sorries.
Yeah.
She's going to give explanations and excuses
Mm-hmm.
for things.
Mm-hmm.
She's seeking approval. She's going to ask a lot of questions of
Mm-hmm.
authority figures.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to be talkative. Oop, sorry, I pressed the wrong button, so everything goes crazy. Yeah, she's going to be, I was trying to put it up here next to bossy. She's going to talk to get approval, right? First one to raise her hand.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to scan this general personality notes real quick just to see if there's anything else in there we want to bring in. She's got a desire to please. So I want to bring this storytelling in, but I want to bring it in another column of the chart.
Okay.
She also is, we've said that she's protective and she's quick to stand up for people.
Yeah.
So she's helpful.
Yeah.
In general, right?
Yeah.
She's bossy, but she likes to help.
Yeah. She's bossy in that little mother kind of way.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And she'll also probably, I mean, she'll be, wounded animals shelter, bringing, birds home with broken wings and all that kind of stuff. And that'll be something she and Nipper can really bond over too. Because he doesn't talk much, and so of course the animals be far more comfortable around him than her, because she's nattering away.
She's loud. Yeah, she's always talking. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. So let's move into beginning to relax. This is where that mothering becomes storytelling.
Okay.
She reveals her fantasies. So she's not going to talk about princesses and fantasies with people she's not comfortable with.
No.
Right? Like, so it's when she starts to become comfortable that she shares what she's reading.
Yeah, and I had this idea in my head that she and Nipper are out at the still, and she's telling him about the story about maybe it's Aladdin and 1,001 Nights or whatever. And if I had a genie, I would want to do this and this and this and have a new family. And Nipper would say something about if he had a genie, he would be able to talk right.
Yeah, so when she's relaxed and alone with Nipper, or relaxed and alone with Lucy, she's gonna like make believe and like play. Yeah. But that doesn't happen when she's in a crowd, right? Or when she's like with her parents, or
Never
when she's when she's uncomfortable, right? Like it's only when she feels safe and starts to relax. So we're gonna have less explanations here. And more fantasizing. So and less apologies. So less explanations and less apologies when she's comfortable.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Like that's going to start to back off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So how does her voice change? If she's bossy and she's talking to get approval and she likes to help and she's quick to apologize, how does she change as anxiety increases? How do you imagine her when her parents are fighting?
If she's physically there, I mean, I can see her crying, bursting into tears. I could see her, don't hurt me, I'll be good, I'll be good, I'll be good, making lots of promises. When she's outside of the room, and knows that her mother's being hit, that there'll be a lot of under the covers and shaking and that kind of thing. Do you think that she would blame her mother is she that self-aware yet to think, it's your fault?
Not at 8.
Because not at 8, no.
Not at 8.
Dolores does later on when in the Bootleggers series with her mother. Her mother is stupid and her mother is, brings it on herself and all that kind of
Yeah, I
stuff.
think that's a bigger connection than you want to give her. Than you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think trying to control the environment and keep it calm is kind of the stage that she's at. Like,
Right.
she's not projecting onto other people yet. She's still
Yeah.
like in this place
Yeah.
where she's just trying to do what she can to control stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so there's an awareness of how other people are acting as we get older, that like younger kids are very self-focused.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's kind of about them. And right at that like stage of, in the States, moving from like elementary school to middle school is when they start to become super aware of
Mm-hmm.
how other people are treating them and how they're reacting to other people. So you
Mm-hmm.
get that
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I really like this idea that she's hiding under the covers and sucking her thumb.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, she gets quiet. It
Mm-hmm.
increases this kind of like, so we have a good like a change in her voice from like this bossy talkative kid to a kid that really retreats
Mm-hmm.
when anxiety happens, which can be
Mm-hmm.
a nice bonding moment between her and Nipper, because they both want to run away,
Yeah.
right? Like they're both fleeing stress,
Right.
if that makes sense.
And that's going to be maybe one of the things that Dolores has a hard time with, because that's not how she reacted,
Dolores does
right?
not run.
No,
Dolores
and
pulls the
and
gun.
and she's not, she wouldn't cry, and
Yeah.
in most circumstances, like she fights back,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the things that Evie sees in Dolores. That is why she's chosen Dolores to be her
Yeah,
nighttime
Dolores is
nurse.
strong. You may
Yeah.
even want to have conversations with Evie questioning gender roles, because that starts to happen around this age.
Oh,
Of
okay.
like, it really happens at 9, 10, and 11, but it can happen at 8 too, of like, you know, you're a girl, but you act like a boy, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of like, especially in the 1920s, like now that conversation is more complicated because
Yeah.
culturally we have a wider conversation about
Yeah.
gender. But in the
Yeah.
1920s, there's
I
clear
was
female
thinking that Dolores would have a conversation with the mother, because she's going to see her with the black eye and all that kind of stuff, and um, sort of sort of from one abused woman to another,
Yeah.
that, and her, why don't you leave him, is the obvious question, and then the mother's saying, well, I don't have the options you do. I don't have a business, I don't
Yeah.
make money, I can't stand up to the men, and so Evie's going to hear all of that and internalize it, right?
Mm-hmm. And there's
um
also a like, the mother needs to have that like, well, he really loves me and you don't
mhm,
understand, and he's not always
mhm.
like this, and this is only happening because he's really stressed out, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
abuse victims like the mother you're describing tend to defend their abuser until they get to a breaking point of realization. So
Right.
if confronted by somebody like Dolores, the mother's likely going to back the husband.
Right.
When I was
and
doing ministry
and
work, I was always really surprised
yeah.
when I'd get into like abusive relationships, especially when I worked a lot with addicts, and they'd be like in an abusive relationship with each other. I would always think like, okay, the one that's being abused is gonna see reason.
Yeah.
And like,
Well,
yeah, and it took me a couple times to realize like, oh no, they can't see out of the abuse. Like
yeah.
I can see out of the abuse for them, but they can't see out of the abuse. So like
Yeah.
they're very trapped in it, which looks a lot like it can look a lot like justifying what's happening.
Right. And one of the things I was going to do with the father, the husband, the abuser, is that gives the mother an excuse, right? Is that he was also abused,
Yep.
and I want to make him very sycophantic around authority,
Yeah.
and then very aggressive around, his own family.
Yeah, which will probably make Sam surprised.
Yeah.
That this is
Yeah.
happening, right? Like Dolores is gonna confront the father.
Yeah.
Touch this girl again, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna blow your jaw off. And then she's gonna go directly to Sam and be like, you have to do something. And Sam's gonna be like, he's an upstanding member of the community. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
you're blowing this out of proportion. That can't be true. That's not real, right? Like, and Sam just being like clouded, because if the father's a sycophant to authority, there's no greater authority in this town than the sheriff.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe the pastor, but those two together. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. How are you feeling? Was this helpful?
This was amazingly good. That I like the idea of where Evie's going to go in terms of her character, because I can see the little bossy chatterbox, teacher's pet kind of personality under the covers.
Yeah.
With her thumb in her mouth, and so having that arc of when things are good and when things get really bad, and how she's always trying to live in the safe space, that
and
good.
I like the where we came to in the difference between Nipper and Evie. I think introducing two kids in the story, having them be very different in personality, is going to make for a much stronger story. And you're building out Dolores's cohort, so you've got Lucy and Sam and Dolores now, and now you're adding two more, and Charlie and Lash, and now you're adding two more. And so we want them to sound a little bit different than the other characters in the cast. And Nipper's going to stand out because of his stutter. But now that we've built this kind of, bossy pants, but really wanting to like live in her fantasy world, she's going to stand out too. And I think that's going to make for a really nice cast of characters moving forward.
Yeah. Super. Hey, thanks, Jeff. This is great. I'm good to go.
Awesome. I'm going to turn off the recording real quick.